Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Dr. Jessica Parker. I'm the owner of the Dissertation Coach, and today I am joined by Dr. Karen Rosenberg. Karen is one of our dissertation coaches. She is also a facilitator at the Academic Writer Space, which is a sister company of ours. And she and I are both very familiar with today's topic, which is about how we tend to, maybe avoid our academic work and procrastinate, and how that can lead to this sort of vicious cycle of judgment and then more procrastination resulting from that. And so we're hoping to help you break that cycle today by highlighting different learned patterns that you may be falling into and developing your awareness, and then obviously sharing some very practical strategies for addressing procrastination and avoidance in your academic work. Please use the Q&A if you have a question you would like Dr. Rosenberg to answer at the end of this webinar. We are recording this webinar, so don't panic if you need to step away or leave early. We will share the recording afterward with you. And as always, you're welcome to reach out to us. We offer free 30-minute consultations, thedissertationcoach.com. You can simply contact us and submit a request if you want to meet with Dr. Rosenberg one-on-one, to consider possibly working together based on what you learn here today. Karen, are you ready to dive in?
I sure am. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Yeah, absolutely.
I am so happy to be with you all today to talk about procrastination and avoidance. Strangely, we can learn by moving toward looking at our procrastination and our avoidance. We can gain better understanding of it. So instead of moving away from it or resisting it, we're going to look at what happens if we move toward it. Jessica, I'm not sure if you're still here, but what I am wondering is if there's a place that we can put a couple of prompts in the chat so that while I'm introducing myself, participants have the option of introducing. I have three questions, just where folks are joining from, what people tend to do when they're avoiding dissertation work, and what you hope to get from today's session. So I'll start by responding to those prompts, and then I'll go back and just introduce myself in a kind of more fulsome way. So I am joining you all from the Toronto area in Ontario, Canada. When I am avoiding my academic work, or really anything that has a little bit of a negative charge for me, I tend to pop onto email, and then if I haven't gotten off a list, some sort of marketing list, if I see, like, literally, I will look at flight deals. I'll be like, oh, maybe I can go somewhere. And what I hope to get from today's session is to share with you some strategies that have felt very generative, both for dealing with procrastination and avoidance and for developing a friendlier relationship with ourselves. Okay. So I will go back a little bit and just introduce kind of some of the facets of my experience that I bring to this topic. So, as an undergraduate at Swarthmore College, I worked as what we called a writing associate. It was basically a writing tutor, and I would work with students on drafts of their papers. Uh, it was a little bit of a badge of honor when I was an undergraduate to procrastinate, to pull all-nighters and be like, I got it in. You know, I only worked from like 2 to 5 a.m. and I got an A on the paper. And that was something that was not available to me because I would just get tired. It was sort of like 2 o'clock would roll around and my roommates and friends would be like, yeah, I'm just starting now. And I'd be like, I really want to go to sleep. So it was interesting, like as an outsider, like having procrastination FOMO in some way. But I think that there was a little bit of a protective charge there. If they didn't absolutely ace the assignment, they could say, well, I really didn't put that much into it. I really just did an all-nighter, part of an all-nighter. So of course, there wasn't that much of me in it. Um, and as these extremely smart, extremely academically capable people went on to graduate school, which many of my friends, like myself from my undergrad, did end up in doctoral programs. It was confusing because you can't write a dissertation in an all-nighter. You can't write a dissertation in a week of all-nighters. And so I both kind of interpersonally in the work that I was doing, and I definitely recognized some of these tendencies in myself. Um, but and in clients that I work with, it's like, but wait, I have excelled in this particular area my entire life, and suddenly my strategies aren't really working. And so that can lead to just tremendous emotional discomfort and confusion and can cause people to kind of back away a little bit. Um, After my undergraduate, I worked in social services for about 10 years, supporting survivors of domestic violence, which led me to graduate school in women's studies. My doctorate's in women's studies, and it's studying violence against women and support systems for women leaving abusive relationships. And my own experience was I definitely had times where I was avoiding the work and times when I was really engaged with the work. And I feel like I engaged in a lot of masking behaviors when it was difficult. And then I'll get into some of the other behaviors that I got into when I pull up the slide deck. Um, but the the crux of it was that I was not overly kind to myself. And I kind of had this like, just do it, just push through. And on the one hand, it worked. You know, I was able to get the degree. And on the other hand, it wore me down in a way that when I work with students and faculty members now, I really have a deep desire to explore another way where we can make friends with our feelings of discomfort, our confusion around like, why am I making this harder for myself? And therefore not only have a more productive, friendly, efficient relationship with our work, but also with ourselves. So let me just check here, Q&A. All right.
Yeah, unfortunately, Karen, our Zoom has once again pushed an update and they've moved the button to enable the chat. I'm not sure what it is. So if everyone could just use the Q&A to enter your responses to the prompts, that would be great.
Yeah. And I love this. So we have three responses that I'll just yeah, making a spreadsheet of holiday expenses to avoid writing my PhD thesis. Yeah, I feel you. Ah, okay. Okay, great. So I'll pop in later to that to see, or yeah, Jessica, I don't know if you're able to hang out and bring the
Mhm.
questions to my attention.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do that.
Now, what I will do is I will share my PowerPoint. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Not yet.
All right.
There we go. It looks like it's loading. Yep, you're all set.
Okay, great. So if folks do want to take a moment, whoops, and add those into the chat, that would be great. And if not, that is a-okay as well. So where you're joining us from, what you do, if anything, when you're avoiding dissertation work, and what you hope to get from our session today. Okay, so what I would like to discuss with you all today, and there is going to be ample time for Q&A, for discussion, for sharing strategies, is to just remind ourselves why dissertations are such amazing opportunities to want to procrastinate and avoid doing the work. I want to look at what it gives us when we consider procrastination as a habit loop and not something that's inherent to us. So, habit loops are formed and they can be examined and reformed. So I find that to be a really affirming and helpful frame. I also, as I mentioned before, I'm going to suggest that when we look and feel into what's going on at those moments where we detach from our work, that there's a lot of really useful information there that can help us understand our habit loops and create ones that serve us better. Again, you're going to hear me talking a lot about awareness and curiosity here, because I think that those are qualities that support this rehabiting, forming new loops, and also is extremely helpful outside of our dissertation work. And ultimately, what a dissertation and any long ambiguous, high stakes project that we really care about requires is that we show up, that we don't need to be perfect. We don't need to be, having our best day, but we do need to show up again and again. And so we're going to talk about some strategies for that. Okay. So procrastination as a word and a term has been around for a super long time, right? So we have this Latin word and then the actual, and pronounced different, but it came into French it's from the French and came in around 1540, which is around the same time as the color orange came into our vocabulary. So this is something that we as humans have been doing for a very long time. And we've had a name for it for a very long time. Samuel Coleridge, the poet in 1810, coined his own term, which is tomorrower, like putting things off for tomorrow, which isn't always a bad thing. But if we obviously keep putting off our dissertation, then it somehow doesn't get done. All right, so you will all have your own version of this. So here, fun fact, when I was writing out this slide, I took, I'm going to say probably 10 or 15 minutes trying to redesign it. Like there was like an AI cat at one point. There was, a lot of really not very good graphics, because this was uncomfortable for me to even narrate out like what happens when I avoid and when I think about the people that I work with and that I support and what happens with them. So there are not going to be any pictures of cats here, although they are extremely cute. I do want to highlight the fact that when we kind of go, some of us, it feels almost like a trance where like we're on social media, something is happening, and then we look up and we're like, time has passed. And so it's usually not a neutral feeling with that. It's often has like a sort of a quality of either guilt or shame or blame or judgment. So nothing wrong. In fact, it's delightful to watch videos of cats, and it's much more powerful when we're doing that intentionally instead of hijacking our own intentions to work. Okay. Reminder, and I don't think that this is going to be new information for us, but no matter how long I've worked with myself, I've worked with people on their working on their dissertation, and then as faculty members for years, and we all seem to get to this point where we need reminding. Why am I not working in what feels like a more efficient manner? So things that make it more difficult to stick with something are when it's unclear what the project is. So as you all know, research necessarily has a messy middle. It sometimes feels like it has a messy beginning and a messy end. And it's unclear exactly what the quote unquote assignment is. So that ambiguity can send our nervous system into a state of high alert. We generally, even if someone were to ask you on a particular day how much you cared about your dissertation, you might be like, oh my gosh, I'm pulling my hair out. But over time, you are in your program for a reason. You are motivated and deeply care about the new knowledge that you're creating and whether or not you get the doctorate and when is going to have an impact on your life. And so it's a high stakes situation, which also can feel threatening at times. Working on any long academic project, including the dissertation, often involves a lot of time where we are sequestering ourselves away from others, which can be really wonderful on retreat and also can feel isolating. There's a lot of, for those of us who have devoted some or much of our lives to academic work, work of the mind, it can get a little murky to understand that I am not my work. Even if consciously we can see like I am just as smart and just as worthy regardless of what happens with this dissertation. uh, the truth is when we are working on our own on these high stakes important projects, that can get a little murky. So then it becomes really, it can feel threatening to do work that doesn't feel excellent because what does it mean about me as a human? Um, and I'm sure that there are other reasons as well. So I put these up here to remind us that it makes sense that we would want to avoid our dissertation work at times, and that we can befriend ourselves and bring us back to it again and again. Okay, so there are many ways to think about procrastination. What I'm focusing on here in in our talk today is on the benefits for short-term emotional self-regulation. So we talk about time and not having enough time or our time being chopped up. And and I'd be delighted to talk about that later in this hour, like those kind of practical suggestions around time management. Um, and there's often this other piece underneath where the dissertation is not feeling comfortable or safe. And so then we step away, we go to the cat videos, I look at my, flights to California, and I'm actually soothed for a moment. Doesn't work so great in the long run. Okay. Um, All right. So this is one of my favorites. There is nothing wrong with productive procrastination. I'm just going to suggest that it can be helpful to understand what's most important for me to get done in any particular bucket of time. That could be a day, a week, an hour. And if I am avoiding that thing to do other things, that is that's can be a case of productive procrastination. So the person who's doing their, I think it was holiday expenses on their Excel spreadsheet, that's great that you're going to have that done. It's great. I think it's a great use of your hour to hang out here and hear some of what I have to share. And we can also understand, like, okay, is this serving me? Am I organizing my time in the way that serves me best in the immediate term, short term, and long term? Um, so the answer can be yes. It can be, you know what? I'm actually exhausted right now, and I'm going to format my references. And then I think that it can take it out of the realm of productive procrastination and just befriending the version of you that is showing up at a particular moment. Um, so I think it's can be helpful to examine, okay, I've been rebuilding my plan, my work plan, and it's taken me 2 days. How do I feel about that? Is there a harder step that I'm avoiding? Okay. So, what we're wanting to do is to recognize some of the benefits in the short term of procrastinating. Um, and also to understand that it can put more pressure on us. And so the way this shows up with people I work with is they become afraid to reach out to their chair, or their chair emails them and they don't really know how to respond. There could go from sort of having a sea of time with no clear markers to, oh my goodness, I'm supposed to be able to talk about what I've been doing over this past period of time. And that makes me feel more pressure. And I feel so behind. I don't know how I'm even going to return. I don't know how I'm going to show up again. All right. This is the part where I am going to make the argument. I'm going to make it in as many ways as I can that it is both the good, it's the good thing, it's the right thing, and it's the effective thing to make friends with yourself and the even when, or maybe especially when you are acting in a way that you are not proud of. We often bring a lot of messages around, we just need to crack the whip, we need to work harder. None of this lollygagging. I'm not going to be lazy anymore. I'm not cut out for this. These really just mean messages that I think we often aren't even that aware of that tape, like what's going on. So what we can do often is make things unintentionally worse for us. So in the short term, this is something that can work as well. All right, I'm gonna, not talk to anybody, and I'm not gonna indulge in any pastimes that bring me pleasure until I get done. And there are times where we can turn toward ourselves and say, with compassion, yes, you know what? I'm gonna take a week. I'm gonna go off to a cabin if I'm able to, and I'm really just gonna focus on this. But it's the flavor and the tenor of it. It's that is important and that I think sets us up much better for the long run. Oops. Many of us may be familiar with the work of Kristen Neff and self-compassion. And so I'm just going to touch on it briefly, but I do think it forms one of the cornerstones of being able to transform our relationship with procrastination and avoidance. So she talks about three components of self-compassion. The first is mindfulness. And in this case, it means having awareness of your moment-to-moment experience as you're feeling it, noticing it, observing it. So this can be very uncomfortable for some of us who are used to being in our thinking mind all of the time. And if things are difficult in our lives, either now or in the past, it can feel unsafe to touch base, take some deep breaths. If you have a meditation or, like do different practices that will bring us into a more intimate understanding of our moment to moment experience. So, if that is the case for you, if this increases your anxiety or makes you feel less safe, then it might not be the time to pick up a mindfulness habit. If that is not the case, then taking time either through a mindfulness practice that you might have outside of the dissertation work, that could be yoga or meditation, you can bring micro practices into your dissertation work. So if you have been working for a while or you see yourself reaching for your email or to get up from your chair, you can do a couple of micro practices that could be as simple as closing your eyes and taking 3 deep breaths and noticing what you notice in your body. Often when I do that, it's very it's the observations are not earth-shattering. It's I'm thirsty, my back is tight, I have a little bit of a headache. And so then I can say, like, okay, is there anything I can do to make things more comfortable for myself and still stay with the work? And often I'm going to take a 5 minute break. I'm going to have a glass of water. I'm going to, oh, I forgot to eat lunch. I'm going to eat lunch. So it's the mindfulness piece. The common humanity is recognizing that as difficult as things can feel for ourselves sometimes, that these are feelings that many doctoral students, academic researchers have felt. And I am part of this fabric of people who are dealing with and showing up for their dissertation in the very best way that I can. And then the final one, which often can be the most difficult, is extending kindness to ourselves, the way we would with a friend, a child, someone in our lives that we have easy love for. And we can just be like, oh, that's really hard. I'm so sorry that's really hard. You're going to get through this. So for those of you who are interested, there's also Kristen Neff has a whole part on self-compassion, excuse me, and fierce self-compassion. So one of the pushbacks with self-compassion sometimes is, well, if I am, always being this kind to myself, won't I never get anything done? And the self-compassion framework has some really great tools for showing up and being kind to ourselves. Okay. Habit loops. So this is, for me, I've been exploring the work of Judson Brewer for the past year with myself and with my clients, and looking at observing these habit loops, the learned behavior part of avoiding a dissertation. So 3 parts, like what happens. So for me, in my mind, where I'm working on something, let's say even this talk that I'm giving right now, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you know what? We're going to be going to New York City at Christmas. I really should I should check the flights. And so what sets it off? Okay, sometimes it's exogenous. I've forgotten to silence my notifications and I get a notification that there's a sale on a flight. Other times it might be, oh, I only have an hour and I want to make this as useful as possible. And I'm scared I won't be able to. All right, I'm off. I'm out. And it's been very interesting because it can feel like a split second between that feeling of discomfort and then I'm out. So the behavior in my case is then spending some amount of time looking at flights. And then the reward, what do I get? I get that I've stepped away from that uncomfortable feeling. I've kind of numbed out a little bit on, looking at flights. Um, and so so the first step he talks about, and that I have found to be very useful, is just actually noticing these loops, not trying to change them at all. Um, okay. There we go. So, applied to the dissertation, what this can look like is, and these are all from coaching conversations I've had over the past year. So I actually work with some students where, especially if their advisors are particularly unskillful at giving feedback to a developing researcher, so we sometimes will look like I will actually be on a call with someone while they open the advisor comments. And left to our own devices, sometimes people will look and see what their advisor has to say. It will trigger a cascade of difficult emotions. Close the document. Okay, I had some short-term relief from that criticism. This one, I feel a lot of empathy. I have done this many a time where it's time to write. So I was in a conversation a couple weeks ago. It was a lit review. A student was trying to synthesize information from a number of articles. They were like, this sounds terrible. You know what? I probably don't know enough. Let me just do another search. Let me read more. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. And with that might be exactly what that student needs to do. In this case, it wasn't because they actually were quite expert on what they needed in order to write that lit review. Um, and then I'm behind. So, oh my goodness, it's my systems that aren't working. Let me take time away to really redo my systems. Again, can be really helpful. And it's that discernment piece that can help us understand if it is or is not. Oftentimes, the reward that we get, this kind of short-term reward, can be emotional, relief, sense of control, a sense of like, I'm good at this, I can do things, which I think I try to be mindful. I do games, the New York Times puzzles. And so sometimes, and I try and I'm decent at it now where I'll say, okay, I am affirmatively choosing to spend, 10 minutes away and I'm going to relax. And the relaxing activity I am choosing is Wordle. And then when I'm doing Wordle and it's depends, kind of fun, kind of not fun, when I solve it, I'm like, oh, did I really just do that so that I could feel like I can do something? I can guess a word with 5 letters in it. So that one's been interesting for me. And then certainty or escape. Okay. So the first big takeaway is to just be aware. So that involves really paying attention when we sit down to work, having this kind of meta awareness. So I'm working on my chapter and I'm also paying attention in a gentle, kind way to my urges and impulses as I'm working. If I then am like, oh my goodness, I need to respond to this text right now, can think about like, okay, what was I doing right before that? And then do like go into the text, do the thing. Don't at first, don't try to change anything. What did I expect that kind of popping out, that distraction to give me? Then paying attention later. Okay, how did that, when I went back, did I feel refreshed? And if yes, then maybe there's no problem there. Or was it then even more difficult to return? Or did I not return at all? Um, so when we step out, and I'll talk about this again later, but it's also ideal if we then make it super easy to return. So if we read that advisor's comments, they are destabilizing. It's good to have a next step of like, oh, you know what? I'm actually going to be with someone when I read these comments, or I'm going to call a friend after I've read these comments, something that will make it easier to go back in. And so then we bring this real, like our researcher mind into what's going on and trying to understand that and trying to be kind to us when we have judgmental, self-judgmental thoughts, and really trying to turn away from them. What's wrong with me? I should have had this done already, which does not serve. Okay. So I'm going to ask folks, and then I'm just going to look at the Q&A, I guess, for a moment. And I'd like you to take a moment and think about when like either didn't make it to the dissertation in the first place or when you drifted away. And if it is easy to share in the Q&A, that would be great. And I'll just give us a minute for that. Hmm. Hmm. Okay. I'm going to just reflect a couple things from the Q&A or the chat that several of us are doing a ton of, like, are holding a lot. So similar to most of the people that I work with, you are not just doing the dissertation, you are caring for people, you are working full time, you are um, taking care of homes. Um, and so just a little love and recognition that it is hard to do all of those things. Okay, I'm actually gonna go, yeah. So triggered, yeah, when I don't really know what to know or understand what I'm supposed to do next. Absolutely. Um, is that, yeah, and is that ambiguity piece. And so we'll get into that in a moment. And feel free to continue. I'm going to continue talking and then feel free to continue putting stuff in this Q&A. All right. Um, so what was I? Okay. I think I'm like wondering if I skipped a first tool. And if I did, this is a little bit of that anxiety thing. Like I don't actually need to interrupt my talk to be like, oh my gosh, did I mislabel the tools? Yeah, practice self-compassion was the first one, but that's a little bit like, I'm so like, just when you have that awareness, I'm like, oh no, was I coming across as disorganized? Just naming that, I'm going on. Okay, mapping the avoidance loops. 3, the 30-second pause. So one can be really tough. And you can set a timer. I often will go for longer than 30 seconds, but I think 30 seconds is a reasonable amount of time for many of us to sit with discomfort, just to catch ourselves up to what's going on sort of just below our consciousness. So this is, let's say I was putting this together, I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't really have a good sense of how to frame this because I don't know, there are going to be people from all over the world showing up to this webinar. I think I actually just am hungry and I just need to grab some crackers. So then take a moment, like, okay, I can step away if I want to, if I need to, but I'm going to sit with myself first and see what's going on. Um, then I have, so this is all this tool asks you to do is to take that pause, try to figure out what's going on with you, add in a little bit of kindness. That's it. Um, because once it is in our consciousness, it becomes much easier to deal with. Okay. The fourth tool is to check the reward. So let's say I did that 30 seconds or I didn't do the 30 seconds. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to put on the next slide. I'm gonna go eat crackers. So I go eat crackers and then I check in with myself. Okay, how am I feeling? I actually feel a little better. Like I was a little hungry and that was kind of distracting. And now my belly's full. 15 minutes later, I'm like, okay, how am I feeling now? Crap. Now I really don't know how I'm going to get back in. I don't know what my next step is. Okay, again, I'm not then going to say, you're so bad and you always do this, and how are you going to get anything done? I just say, oh, that's interesting. That move of bringing that to consciousness and being like, oh, actually, my belly feels not fantastic, that in and of itself helps to update the habit loop and I can then begin to break it. And next time I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm going to go for those crackers. I might go for the crackers again. Many times down the road, I might be like, you know what? That doesn't sound appealing. I'm going to make a different choice. Okay. We need to make it really, really easy to go back. So, one thing that is like the perfect breeding ground for procrastination and avoidance is having something that is really big or really ambiguous to return to. So, someone in the chat talked about, I often will procrastinate or avoid something when I don't really know what the next step is. And that makes a ton of sense. So, what we can do for ourselves is to break the steps down into smaller and smaller pieces. These pieces can be tiny, and like is on the slide, it can be open the document, it can be sit down at my desk. Um, when then we go and we open the document, we reread the last paragraph. If we get to a point where we're like, I don't actually know what my next step is, then we can step back and say, okay, what are my resources here? What are the options? And you can kind of work the problem as the capable person you are. You can say, okay, is this something where I need to reach out for more information? Do I need to do a targeted amount of research? Is it just ambiguous? And so do I need to write down the different options and make my best guess and move forward? Um, but so as to name the ambiguity, see what resources we can mobilize to try to resolve it. And then when we can't fully resolve it, make a best guess and go with it. Again, just to emphasize, the return step needs to be smaller than the avoidance urge. Okay, then we can gift ourselves an easier re-entry. And so we sometimes talk about this as parking on the downhill or leaving breadcrumbs for ourselves. If possible, and it's not always possible, we don't want to leave our work at a point of intense ambiguity and frustration because it will make it more difficult to arrive next time. So a really powerful and easy to implement tool is to take the last few minutes of your work session to plan your next point of entry. Um, and you can write down notes. So pretend, even if you're going to be returning to your work in a couple of hours or in a day or two, pretend you'll have been away for a month. And so write down step by step how you're going to get back in. This may feel overly simplistic, and I just would suggest that you try it because the super simple part is the magic of it is, well, okay, I may not know how I'm going to frame my analysis in light of the literature, but I sure do know how to fix that one table, and that's where I'm going to start. Okay. So This is again a previous slide talked about curiosity as being kind of non-judgmental, open awareness, and just being genuinely interested in your moment-to-moment experience. So one way is to be like, huh, what's going on right now? Huh, I just ate a bowl of ice cream and I somehow didn't end up opening the chapter. Huh, what do I think was going on? I just cleaned my child's room instead of responding to that stressful email. Huh, what's going on? And we can then develop a more friendly and intimate relationship with the decision making that we sometimes go through. And we can then um, make some best guesses for when we can sit with discomfort in the work and when we need to have a real break or need to pull in some support. Okay. So we have these are the a repeat these are the loops. So if we then are going to try to interrupt them, um as I discussed earlier, so we see how we avoid and we bring the awareness to it. Then it gives us the opportunity to try new things. It takes a lot of energy to try new things, which is why habits are so compelling and why we have so many of them. And our minds are plastic, so we can lay down new habit loops. Open advisor comments bring a sense of awareness and curiosity. Realize that it feels uncomfortable. What do I do next? I realize, and that could be, oh, I need to put this down for now and bring a friend or a loved one nearby to help me read them. Or, oh, I want a colleague or a coach to help me make sense of these. Writing the one awkward sentence, if we bring awareness and curiosity. Someone put in the Q&A. I don't know if everybody can see everybody else's Q&As, but someone brought up the really wonderful book by Anne Lamott, Bird by Bird, that talks about um, I'm gonna just use the curse word, shitty first drafts. It's a fantastic, fun, extremely short read. And so there might be like, okay, oh, it's painful to write this so poorly, or how I perceive it to be so poorly. But instead of determining like, oh, I just don't know enough, maybe I'm gonna try writing this out longhand and just brainstorming. And there could be more possibilities with that. And then the I'm behind, bringing awareness and curiosity opens up so many more interesting and productive ways forward. Okay.